Hi class, this is Professor Brennan and I'm here again continuing our conversation about policy debate. This is for my argumentation class. I've already done one video. This is policy debate video number 2. And we left off talking about the two types of speeches in policy debate. Let's take a look. So now I find my cursor there. There we go. Okay, here we are. So the way we like to think about this in argumentation is to think of the speeches that we're giving, or the claims, basically the presentation pieces that we're giving or delivering, are called constructive or rebuttal. Constructive has to do with the speeches that you're making that you're introducing your stock issues. Okay, you're building your argument. Constructive means building, to construct, to build, right? You're building. All of this with your argument requires all your prepared materials, all your research, all of your stuff is right there in your argument as you build your argument. Then, in the rebuttal phase, you are arguing against the stock issues. This is where you're refuting them. One of the ways that you can do that is suggest that whatever change the opposition, and the opposition could be, if you're on affirmative, it's a negative, if you're a negative, it's affirmative. By doing what they're doing, is this going to make things worse? But this is a way, a term of understanding whether we're talking about rebuttal pieces of the debate, or we're talking about constructive pieces of the debate. And here's the other thing about in refutation, when we get there, when you are doing rebuttal, is that in rebuttal, you actually prepare it at that point where we introduce the, when we do the debate, we have both of presentations by both sides, as well as question and answer periods. And when that's finished, you have time to then create your rebuttal, which ends as 1 minute apiece for each person in the debate. And when you do that, you don't have prepared material. You have to prepare it based upon what just happened in that whole entire 20-minute debate that you had with you and your partner with the other side. You create a rebuttal in response to what was presented. And the other thing is, you're not allowed to bring any new material in. So whatever happens in that debate, whatever is brought up, is the only thing that you can address. You can't bring new material. It's like cheating. You can't bring up something else. You have to address what was addressed. You have to respond to what was addressed in the first part of the debate. This will make more sense as we continue to talk about this. All right, debates have rules. Everyone should consider your debate behavior and participation as fair play. Okay. Depending on what kind of person you are, how aggressive you are, how big of an arguer you are, you need to be ethical. No ad hominem. You can't attack people. You need to respond to what's being said, not to the person. Beware of using fallacies, overgeneralizing, hasty generalizations, things like that. And if you hear your opponent using that, it's your job to point that out. Okay. You may not introduce any new arguments in your rebuttal speeches. So I said that already. When you get to the rebuttal phase, which is 1 minute apiece after you've had time to then, means not prepared means you can't bring the materials, but you get to prepare there on the spot what you're going to say. Okay. You can write some things down so you can remember, but you have 1 minute to rebut. And then it is the job of the judges and the opposition to pay attention if this code of ethics is violated and pointed out. So it means it's your job, to pay attention to what's happening, how the other side is acting. If they've introduced other material, if they're being unethical in any way, it's your job to pay attention if they're doing that. Because the person who's doing it's not going to probably even be aware that they're doing it. All right, policy debate structure. Now we're going to get right into the structure of how we're going to do this debate. So the general order of the debate. The first affirmative, you have 2 people on the affirmative and 2 people on the negative side. Okay? So first affirmative does their 4-minute. In this case, I believe it's going to be 4 minutes. You're going to have 4 minutes to present your stock issues. Then the cross is by the second opposition. So whatever, if let's say, I'm just going to use names that I'm going to make these names up. Let's say Jack and Jane are on the affirmative. Jack and Jane are the affirmative. Got it? Jack and Jane are affirmative. And then we've got Sam and Shelley on the opposition or the negative. Okay? Whoever speaks first, if Jane introduces the argument, she becomes first affirmative. She remains first affirmative. We call it 1A. And that puts Jack in the place of being second affirmative, 2A. Okay? So if Jane does a first affirmative speech, now we have to know who's taking the lead here, and meaning who's going to be first and second in the question and answer and in the presentation of the debate on the opposition. So we have Sam and Shelley. Let's say it's Sam. He's going to be the first opposition, okay, or the first negative. That means Shelley's the second one. The reason why you need to know this is because in debate, you need to know what your place is and when you're supposed to respond, because it can get confusing. You with me? So we've got Jane and Jack over here. Jane's first affirmative. Jack's going to be second affirmative. And then we have Sam and Shelley over here. And Sam is going to be first negative, and Shelley's going to be second negative. And when you know how the order's going to go, then you know when it's your turn and who you have to address, what the relationships are. Okay, you got that part? Now, notice the cross-examination is by second opposition. So, Shelley over here is going to have to really pay attention to what Jane is saying. I mean, Sam will too, but especially Shelley, because she's the one that's going to ask Jane the questions. She's going to interrogate Jane on her first affirmative delivery of her first speech. Got it? So that's why you need to know the order. Because if you're not paying attention, you don't know what's your turn, and you need to pay attention to what the other side is doing. And you know what? Sam needs to pay attention too, because Sam can help Shelley. He can't speak. Only Shelley can ask the questions. That's the way it works. Everybody takes a turn. So Jane can only speak when it's Jane's time, and Jack can only speak when it's Jack's time. Okay, let's continue on. So then, once that cross happens by the second opposition, we've got the first opposition speech. If we go back to this, we've got Sam and Shelley, right? Sam's turn. Sam presents his stock issues in response to whatever policy that they're debating. And then the cross is by the first affirmative. Who is that again? That's Jane. Jane gets to ask the questions now. Okay, it's Jane's turn. So Jane better be paying attention to what Sam is saying. Second affirmative speech. Second affirmative, who is it? Jack. Jack's turn to talk. Jack gets to present further, demonstrate whatever their claim is, whatever stock issues. Maybe they decided to only present part of the argument and they're presenting the rest of the argument here. Jack's doing that. However you decide to do it is all up to you. Or he's going to present new information, right? Because you still are presenting your whole argument here. So he does that. And then who do you think, now that you know these crosses, who do you think it's going to be? Cross by first opposition. So now Jack, now it's Sam. Sam gets to ask questions, gets to interrogate Jack. Finally, we have second opposition speech. Last but not least, it's Shelley. Now, who hasn't had the cross yet? You're going to be able to figure this out yourself. Who hasn't asked the questions? That's right, Jack. So now Jack is going to ask questions to Shelley. And gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the first round. That in itself, the first part of it, like there's 2 rounds. That's the first round. And the way the affirmative speech is in the crosswork, it's usually 4 and 2, 4 and 2, 4 and 2. So you get 4 minutes to present that argument. I'm pretty sure it's 4 minutes, but I'm going to have to go back and look at my timing. But it's about that. All right, here we go. Now we have this thing. After that, we have time where you're going to collect yourselves. You two can talk to each other. You talked with your partner and really think about what information your other side presented. And then you need to create your rebuttal. So it's going to go in the same order. It's going to go first, second, second. Okay? First, second, second. Same order. You have 1 minute to do your rebuttal. And each of you do that. And when that's over, that's your debate. That is basically the kind of debate that we're going to have. And it's a general, what I would call the general order of a debate. It's really fun. The thing is, it's very frustrating. It's frustrating. So, okay, cool. Let's go on. Let's see what else is next. Okay, now let's get into, I'm going to make this my last video. We're going to kind of explain in more detail each side of what each side needs to accomplish. We're going to stop there and I'll see you in a minute.